Welcome back, everybody. We're right here on Moonstruck on Riot Radio. And today we're going to be talking about God, Him, the big creator of, well, pretty much everything in existence. And I want to kind of dive into Him not as maybe religious scriptures describe Him as, a being or entity of ultimate power, but maybe just an idea, a concept, which is just the aspect of creation as it is, and kind of look at that through the lens of somebody who is seeking to understand the bigger picture, really, when it comes down to this overarching idea of a creator, or somebody who is even a spectator overseeing the story as it plays out. And I think part of that comes along with understanding that in all its aspects. And we've talked a lot about the fundamental concepts on this show, light, the aspect of creation coming into being, light materializing into matter, and matter ascending out back into light, and kind of those two processes and how they go together. This concept of enlightenment, reaching up and kind of touching a state of consciousness higher than yourself, and kind of seeking to understand something greater or outside of you. And I think one of the things about human beings in general is we all feel somewhat alone, or we all feel that some aspect of the self is missing. And I feel like that aspect of the self that's missing is the infinite part. It is the part that has the ability to create, right? So I know I've said this before, that God has deemed us his greatest creation, right? And I think that is because we have the ability to kind of create from our world, from our experiences, and from what we've seen, right? Almost that if you can see somebody else do something, then you can find a way to do it yourself, right? So there's a kind of a lot of aspects that tie into what makes up the concept of God, especially when we're talking about it in a more objective view, where it's more of an idea than an actual religious concept of somebody up in the sky, but more just the aspect of a creator who is a being of pure light that can materialize anything, that has no preconceived notions about what is right and wrong, what is dualistic, and what is lying within that realm of separation, and separating things into good or bad, or up and down, black and white, but instead seeing things outside of that realm of divisibility. So I feel like one of the aspects that come along with this is the concept of the true light, which is really that aspect that generates or runs our consciousness, right? The aspect of light inside of all of us. Everything, as we've talked about on the show before, is an aspect of light. Everything we see around us is a creation of light. And understanding that means that we all come from the same place. We all come from the same thing. We all come from cosmic dust, or universal dust, even though it makes up 0.03% of the entire universe, or 0.05, and what stars make up 5% maybe of the entire universe. So a lot of the universe is actually proven by science as just to be empty space, or empty void of nothing, or energy, right? Dark matter, dark energy. And when we talk about these concepts, it really reflects something that has been termed in religious scriptures or texts as magic, right? And this concept of invisible energy moving around the body, which we can't see or touch. So, and if you look in all the places that science has touched, inside the atom, for example, the space in between the subatomic particles, the space in between the electrons and the protons and the neutrons, there is empty space. I think it's probably more than 70% of the atom is filled up of empty space, right? You have the central nucleus and the electron that it's in orbital revolution around. So that is pretty much a structure that is devoid of mass, right? Like, it has mass, but most of it is empty space, right? So in between there is where energy can really move around and cycle through, and you got this kind of matrix that is in revolution, kind of going around and around and around. And when we think about time, especially in this dimension where it only moves in one direction, we're really talking about that cycle of time that we here on Earth are kind of are jammed into, right? Or are stuck in a pattern of time moving in one direction. And, you know, when we talk about things like heaven, when we talk about things like hell, when we talk about other realms or other dimensions in the universe, time doesn't necessarily move the same way it does in this dimension, right? So, you know, some people say that, you know, hell, like 1 year there is like 10 Earth years, or in heaven, like, you know, maybe time moves quicker or whatever, because, you know, maybe that has something to do with different levels of density, right? You know, Einstein talked about greater masses in the universe cause time to move slower near that object, right? So there's a lot of things that science can overlap with the concepts of spirituality and religion, as we've talked about many times on this channel. And, like, I want this to be an episode where I could kind of sum up all that we have talked about, especially over the course of the semester here, and just really review the concepts that I'm going to leave you guys with when, you know, I'm no longer here doing this show, and kind of give you guys something to think about as you move forward, because everything that you need, everything that you could possibly need in existence is already where you are. And when we talk about God, when we talk about prayer, when we talk about concepts of reaching out to a higher power or a higher state of being or a higher point of enlightenment or higher self or whatever you want to call it, we're not talking about talking to a old white man with a beard or old white beard up in the sky and he's granting your wish magically. We're more talking about the concept of an everlasting source of energy which can create from absolute nothing. We're talking about the force that can bind together molecules and bind atoms. We're talking about the fundamental forces of creation. We're talking about magnetism. We're talking about the electromagnetic force. We're talking about nuclear force. We're talking about strong and weak nuclear force. We're talking about gravitational force, right? All the four fundamental forces of the universe. And what Einstein talked about was bringing that all together in a concept or some kind of elaborate concoction which outlines the unified field, and he called it unified field theory, and he never got to finish that work, but I think that is alluding to something that is right on the same mark as what we determine as God, a fundamental unifying force of creation or everything in existence. So this ability to create already exists inside of you in some amount. I feel like when you pray, what you're doing is trying to consciously tap into that power, or tap into an aspect of your consciousness which has more capability to create or more ability to derive things from, right? It's representing a certain aspect of creation, which is the infinite, the ability to pull things from nothing, to pull from the void, pull from empty space, pull energy into matter. And I want to explain this too, that I can't another topic we're going to talk about later in the episode is a lot of these things cannot be taught, they must be realized, and you must realize within yourself that the universe is a lot older and wiser than all of us here on Earth. And I'm talking to every single one of you out there listening. The universe and the cosmos is a lot wiser than every single one of us. And to think that we're conscious beings on this planet, we don't really have the slightest clue how we got here, in the sense that, you know, we didn't just come out of nowhere. There had to be a story before us, or something that created us, or something we came from, even if that is out of thin air of the cosmos, or cosmic dust as you want to say it. That cosmic dust is far greater in intelligence than anything we have interacted with or built here on this planet. So next time you want to pray, or next time you want to reach out to God or reach out to some higher power outside of yourself, I want you to consider that. I want you to consider that the universe has many secrets that we might never know. And the only way that you can really ever find that out is by asking the question. And I feel like that's what prayer really is. It's reaching out to try and grasp something that is not readily available to you, or it's not in your immediate vicinity, and you're trying to tap into a certain type of energy that is going to help you accomplish something, help you bring out a certain aspect of that within yourself, and translate that into the world through you. You know, like prophets, for example. People talk about prophets like Jesus, and they say that, like this one is bringing the messages of God, right? But the messages of God is coming through a divine instrument, which is the prophet, or which is the person who is basically delivering the message, right? And by doing this, that person who is receiving that message becomes a divine instrument. They interact with the divine, so the divine basically rubs off on them. It's almost like, how should I think about it? If you're somebody who, say you're a physicist, right? And you work in a lab with, maybe you're running nuclear or experiments that involve radiation. Sometimes you pick up radiation on you, And it's the same kind of concept that goes into interacting with higher forces of creation. They rub off on you, not maybe in the form of, it's clear that you've, touched some magical angelic being, but more in the sense that your state of consciousness has changed from the place where you started off. The place where you are now is not in the same frame of thinking that it was when you began your journey, or before you interacted with that type of energy that you called in. So these are very fundamental concepts of not just like, prayer, religion, or spirituality. I want this show to really have taught that all of those things go beyond that. It goes beyond into every single day and every single moment of your life, and how you live it involves magic. Whether you see it or not, magic is all around you, and divine creation, divine essence is all around you. Divine energy is all around you. The thing that is keeping you from realizing that is the own perceptions that we have on the world, the way we look at the world, the lens that we look at it with, right? And if we choose to look at it through the lens of, well, I'm not necessarily religious, so none of these things exist, blah, 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 then you're shutting out a portion of information. Because I'm not saying that believe in it. I'm saying that accept that as a concept exists. And because it exists, it must represent something, even if it's not the way you see it. So, for example, Einstein's talking about the unified field theory, a type of force that unifies the four fundamental forces that science has discovered on Earth. When we're talking about God and a unified force, we're talking about the same thing. The only difference is we're framing in two different narratives. And that is the division that is separating society right now and where it was thousands of years ago when they came across these concepts of, religion and prophets and messages from the divine and all this stuff. It's all the same thing. Just because you throw a different label on it and call it science, it doesn't make it something changed. It means you're analyzing it through a different lens, right? So, I mean, I realize that I'm not going to be able to essentially make everybody a believer by, just talking on here about God or whatever. But the point is that the source of creation is all around you. And when we're talking about a source of creation, we're talking about the same thing it talks about in the Bible. And it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, that's going to affect you. If you don't believe in gravity, gravity doesn't care. Gravity doesn't say, oh, well, he doesn't believe in me, so I guess I'll just stop doing my job. Or, it doesn't just decide that, okay, well, might as well fling everything off the planet and, no need to pull everything towards the earth anymore. Gravity doesn't think that or do that, right? It just does what it's supposed to do. It acts the way it's supposed to act. It remains the same force. God is the same way. The only difference is we're talking about a conscious state of being. We're talking about conscious form of energy, conscious force of creation that can hear what you say and bring you whatever it is that you're asking for. Maybe not in the same way that you ask for it, but it will listen and it will respond in time, and it will provide you in some form what you asked for. And I think the most important thing to realize really about this is that you're tapping into something much greater than yourself. And when you realize that you can do a lot more than you thought you could because you have another higher power behind you. And I think there's an element of humility that comes along with that, which is, I feel like, why so many can't tap into that kind of state of consciousness. And myself included, I'm no exception to this, We all got ego, and we all think like, oh yeah, we're top guy or whatever, we're the main character in the story. We all think we're main character. We all think we're MC, right? Walking around thinking we're the best or whatever, in some sense anyway, thinking it's all about us. But when you add an element of humility into that, or add a point of realizing your limitations, at least, to analyze who you are and what you can achieve now, between what you want to achieve, you're accepting that you're not there. And through acceptance, you form humility of, your limitations. And by doing that, you can really tap into that force of creation. But it comes down to you again. Like, the power is within you. It's not going anywhere. It's never gone anywhere. It's not planning on leaving or coming down to you at some moment unless you ask for it. It's always been with you from the time you've existed in the cosmos. Before you've even come down to this planet and been born in this life, magic has always been a part of you. And it's always going to be a part of you, because to be on this earth and to be conscious and to realize things around you and to see people around, to see living, breathing things, to see trees, to see things grow and things change, that is conscious awareness in its purest state. That is the element of God. We're talking about a pure state of being. So you're basically God's embodiment on earth in a sense, because you're seeing creation through your lens. And when you realize that, and this is maybe what a lot of spiritualists refer to as enlightenment, and don't mistake me, you can't maintain this state forever, which is why so many of those yogis and monks go up into the mountains and they meditate there and they try to focus their mind on consciousness and cultivating focus and doing all that, and they detach themselves from the world because that's their path and that's how they've chosen to utilize their consciousness. But that's that's an extreme form of detachment, I would say. And really, what you're trying to cultivate is the ability to focus and the ability to embody a state of being, really. And by doing that, you can then reach a state termed enlightenment, where you can see everything that is in creation or in existence as a byproduct of yourself. So if I were to look around at everything I see in the world and look at it as a creation of myself, because I am here, because I am witnessing something, that means everything that is around me, everything that is in existence, is a byproduct of my creation, because I am here witnessing it. And that is the state of God, or the state of being like God. Essentially, you being God's embodiment on earth. That is what it means, right? It means because I'm witnessing a story, that means I am the creator, because I am the one witnessing the story, right? And that's not a state of consciousness that anyone can achieve very easily. Like, you have to be able to center your mind and be able to cultivate focus and, unblock the energy centers and, relieve yourself of certain karma and all this stuff. I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but I'm saying that if you reach out to that and know that it's there, you'd be surprised what you can find. And even if you don't, you're not able to reach that state, you might find things that set you on the path for something you might have wanted your entire life, or overcome some kind of block that you thought was plaguing you. So it really comes down to just understanding that you have that creator potential within you. And, you have the ability to tap into that state of being like God, or being God, in the sense that not some egotistical sense, but in the sense of releasing egotism, releasing material world connections, releasing everything but your state of being in the present moment, understanding that everything and you are in a harmonic flow and have always been in a harmonic flow, or in some type of melody, right? In some type of flow. And when that happens, you can see the reflection in the water clearly. You can see the reflection in the pond. You can see the writing on the wall. You can see, what most people would declare as psychic sense, or your intuition, or messages from spirits or angels or whatever, right? You're seeing the unseen because you're in a state of stillness inside of yourself. And when you're in a state of stillness inside of yourself, when the pond is calm, when the water is calm and clear, you can see the ripples. And that's all you're seeing. That's all we're ever seeing. When, somebody walks, there's little ripples in the pond. When, somebody shouts, there's vibrations in the water. And it's basic physics. And I think the only reason we don't kind of tie these things together here on Earth is because, they teach us that A, B, C, D, whatever, is more important than understanding where we came from before that. And one of the things I'll say maybe is that a lot of people like to say to maybe you in your life, maybe you've heard this before, that you don't know everything. And I would say that statement is not accurate. I would say you do know everything. The thing is, you just can't remember it. And what I mean by that is, think of how many experiences and how many things you have learned over the years, and you've either forgotten it, or you've not paid attention to it, or you're just not focused on it because you've deemed it not something that is important enough to pay attention to, or to hold close to you in the sense of it's important information. And that's pretty much what happens with everything over time, right? The connection eventually fades, and it goes down the river, just like the rest of the things in life. And understanding that really gives you a clear perspective. But understanding that river can flow both ways and that information can be pulled back. It can be pulled back from wherever it goes. This is the most maybe imperative thing to the story, that you always have the ability to pull from that infinite void. You always have the ability to see what's inside, really. And when I started this episode, I was planning on talking about, the seven churches of Revelation, what they represent. I don't know if we're gonna have time for all that, but the thing is, I wanted to allude to a much bigger topic, which is, if we're gonna talk about our Father, God, then we got to talk about it in a perspective that we can understand it. Because if we don't get the whole view of releasing that subjectivity of, oh, God is this guy in a book, and I read about him, and I heard these stories about him, and now I know him. If we don't release that narrative, you're never going to know God, or a state of God, or enlightenment, or anything like that. Because the state of enlightenment comes with releasing all those preconceived notions about who you think he is. And even what I've said here today is not even completely accurate, because that cannot even explain this aspect of creation in its entirety. We're talking about essentially just the state of energy itself. And that's not something that you can quantify or put in a lab or do anything with, right? It's like talking about dark matter or dark energy, You can't hold it in your hand, you can't bottle it up. If you tried to hold it in your hand, it'd go right through your hand. So it's based on laws that are meant to defy human capacity to understand. And that is something that I think when people realize, in the sense of trying to understand the universe or trying to understand things about God or life, when you put it in that perspective, then you understand that, well, we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg. We've just started down the path of trying to understand what this is, or understanding what this is. And yeah, I mean, what do you really say about a topic like this when you're describing something that can't be quantified? Talking really about something that is, just beyond human capacity. And I think maybe it should be that way, because if you looked at all the things that we have done on this planet to this beautiful thing, and seen how society can go from something so peaceful as, human beings just like living, breathing, living life, interacting with nature, hunting, eating, sleeping, the basic things, and taking society and turned it into something that is run purely on capitalism, or a sense of egotism about, well, if I could get to the top, and if I have to step on anyone along the way, then so be it, right? Then would you reveal yourself to humanity? Would you reveal your ultimate powers of creation to everybody on Earth? I wouldn't, if I were God. So I think, with that being said, that really sums up why we feel so far from him. It's because he can see into us as much as we can see into him. So if he looks inside of you and sees that, you have an ulterior motive, you can't play God with that. If you pray and you ask for something and it's not out of the purity of wanting it and knowing why you want it and being pure in that sense of knowing why you want it, then it's not gonna materialize in the way you ask for it. And I think, with that being said, we've stumbled onto a kind of another aspect of this. We've stumbled onto the aspect of him being separated into these different divisions. And I'll just cover them briefly, because This is more of an episode where I'm just kind of summing up everything we've covered on this show in a kind of philosophical, deep, introspective manner. Because I'm not going to be here to be able to, teach or elaborate, rather, on these subjects forever, I think that maybe in 1,000 years this work might actually be appreciated when humanity comes along a little bit more and realizing what our state of consciousness actually means and just a place in the cosmos that we're inhabiting temporarily. And that every day you should just be looking towards what else can I learn about myself, what else can I see into, what box can I peer into that has wisdom for me to explore, and just kind of keep that childlike creativity alive. Because I feel like so many of us, especially when we get older, are going into these periods in our life where that childlike mentality has been snuffed out, and at that point you're just a matrix agent, or really you're just an NPC or a robot, right, in the system. And if you look in the mirror and you say to yourself that's not who you want to be, then you gotta ask yourself, who do you want to be, and what do you want your essence and life to be based on, your life force, right? This is all energy moving through you, right? And if your energy consists of eating garbage food, talking negatively about yourself or other people, always trying to do things selfishly and not caring about, essentially repercussions of how you affect things like the planet, for example, or the environment or whatever, in terms of connecting with a force outside of yourself, just for example, then you're going to be a reflection of all those things. You're going to be a reflection of somebody who's cut off, negative, locked into a cycle of essentially self-prosecution. And I don't believe that's what we came down here to do, but the system we've been brought up into as a mind-altering way of enforcing that on us. And the really challenge is to overcome all those obstacles and see past the illusion. See that if nothing I do on Earth in my time matters, that can also be a blessing. Because that means that, well, if nothing matters, I got nothing to lose, right? So, and I think there's a freedom that comes along with that, where you can actually explore your essence to the fullest potential. You can, you can be like Goku or Vegeta. You can pull out that energy to the greatest extent. So, just to sum up, I want to talk about the 7 churches of Revelation, just to end with a bit of, religious scripture. And, typically these 7 churches, we're talking about Ephesus, we're talking about Smyrna, we're talking about Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. We're talking about the 7 churches that represent the 7 energy centers in the body, and represent certain aspects of the creation. And it's talked about in the Bible, and I would say Revelation. If you want to look into, if you're somebody who's big into the Bible, I would say the most important point in the Bible is the aspects of Revelation, because they outline a period where they're really diving into the depths of the human psyche and understanding these 7 energy points and what they represent. And typically, the lower centers represent, they talk about the 7 candlesticks, right, in the Bible. And typically the lower centers represent these survival instincts, which, like, you have to do things in the material world, and sometimes they could have repercussions that are not always looked upon as maybe divinely or as in nature as you would have And, as you go up to the higher ones, it becomes more about recognizing duality, or recognizing the impacts of sin, such as with Thyatira. It said that, that girl Jezebel, who is, slept and, been with a whole bunch of people, what is it said, that I will curse her children with death, or something like that. That that is basically just elaborating on that. If you essentially devoid yourself of your attachment to your heart and true feelings, and basically have sexual relations with whoever, then there's going to be consequences, because your heart or your soul is not placed in the place that it should be for that, right? So it really comes down to just self-reflection and utilizing that power responsibly. I was just talking behind the scenes with one of my producers, and we were talking about the concept of absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if you had absolute power, I think that, well, we would be corrupted absolutely. And I think that does not. There's not one person who's an exception to that rule. And I think that, the cycle almost that we're in is, you fall off and you get back up, you realize your downfall and you get back up and try again. So I didn't get to all the stuff that, I planned to get to in this episode. And, I just wanted to kind of take the opportunity to sum up this show and sum up all that we've learned. And I really feel like that, I'm just grateful I got the opportunity to share some information out there with everybody. And, I hope it was edifying of the mind, and, caused you to at least think deeply about things, or to contemplate things that you might have felt important. So yeah, if you can take anything from me, just, try to think deeply about things, try to have some introspective on the self. And, that's really all I can say. And, we won't be able to get into Archangel Michael and all the extra topics that I've wanted to cover for today, but I felt like this was maybe more important. And, sometimes that's all you can cover, right? You only got the time you have. And, this has been Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio. I'm Ryan. You can follow me on Instagram at top_sorcerer. And I'm signing off.